I started to understand that God knows all of my hopes and dreams, everything that I am. And as long as I know that and trust that He knows them, I was no longer handing my worth and value over to other people. And I was able to find my footing as a person in that I know who I am, and so does God. That's what this program gave to me in a way that nothing else in life has.
Welcome to today's Be Faithful episode. Today I have with me Erica. I'm really excited and grateful that she's here and willing to do this with me. I found Erica through our stake leadership because I reached out to try and find somebody that is familiar with the 12-step program. And so I was referred to you after you had given permission. So today Erica is going to share with us a little bit of her story, but what we are really going to focus on is understanding the 12-step program through the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and what it does for people, how inspired it is, and anyways, so I want to learn more about the 12-step program because I personally have not been through it, but I have always been so intrigued by it. Would you mind giving us just a brief bio of just what you want people to know in general about you, and then we'll go through.
Yeah, my name's Erica. I've been part of this program it'll be 9 years this July 17th, 2017. I loved that day so I could remember it.
Oh, cool.
And it's been a journey and a process of layer by layer cleanup of things in my life that were causing me a lot of problems. I'm a mom of 2 sons. My youngest just left for the military. He's at basic training. He's in the Army, going to be a combat medic specialist. And my other son, he is married and up at Utah State. He served a mission in Newport Beach, California. So I'm an empty nester, which is a really weird feeling to be, and I'm really grateful that I've had this program in my life that has helped to not only heal me, but heal my family as well. It is truly inspired by God for any and everyone, and it's been adapted to fit all different kinds of different problems that we all have. I wouldn't say that I was an extreme addict either direction. I was more of a pretty regular person that had life problems that I was turning to things outside of me just trying to cope. And those things eventually became stuff that made my life unmanageable and out of control. I didn't quite know what to do or how to handle it. Nobody ever taught me the process of repentance other than, oh, I'm sorry, and change it.
Wait, so were you raised in the church?
Yes and no. My mom's side of the family is LDS. My dad's side is not. My grandma took me to primary, and so I had the gospel in my life from my grandparents. And my mom was active inconsistently. It was an off and on thing, but she always had a testimony, and God was part of our life. And the LDS culture I was surrounded by it growing up in Utah, but I didn't actually have my own testimony until I started seminary in 9th grade, and that's when my whole life changed, the beginning of changes for me, and just learning what I actually believed in, because I didn't have any idea. I just kind of went when we went to church, and it was part of my life, but not really. I was baptized by my grandpa, and as a kid, my parents were divorced young. I was 5. I'm the oldest, and I was a parentified daughter in lots of ways, in that I took care of my brothers. My mom was single for a lot of our growing up, and I played a role in my family where I was kind of like a husband to her in the ways that I helped her. And so I really didn't get to have a childhood. I was more of helping was my role in everything. And there was a lot of chaos in just step parents, and we'd go back and forth between our parents. We'd go see my dad for the summers, and it was just very different lifestyles from one parent to the other. And my parents were I loved them both. They both were doing the best they could, but they were also just growing up. They were young when they had me, and those kind of play into your life. And I was young when I had my own kids and did the same thing, and that I was growing up right along with them. A lot of those experiences, though, and watching the chaos of their lives, there was a different feeling at church. There was a different feeling with my grandma. When I was baptized, I remember the feeling of being clean and those things sticking with you. And so the gospel had always brought me peace in my life. It was never something that made things harder. In fact, when my mom was going to church, life was better and things felt better and things were different. And when she wasn't, they didn't feel the same. I had some stark contrasts in understanding and feeling and seeing the difference of what God in your life does versus what God not in your life does. So I got married young. I married my first boyfriend. I struggled a lot with weight, and I was just a chubby kid and just got heavier as I got older because food was my first addiction. And I was I'm 5'2", and I was around 250 my senior year at my heaviest. And it was really hard. I was teased a lot of my life. I never dated. I didn't really have anything. I had friends and I was social and I loved people, but at the same time I was guarded because I had been hurt a lot and experienced a lot of pain. I was depressed. I was to a point where I was like, how am I ever going to have a life? And nobody ever thought I would ever lose weight or get it together. And it was depressing in that I didn't know how I was going to either. I'd tried everything and nothing worked. And I found a Christian weight loss program that was actually a 12-step adaptation that turned food addictions into, it was Gwen Chamblin is the lady that developed it, and it changed, it's Way Down Workshop, and it changed my life. And that's the first place that I came into a connection of a 12-step type of program. And I lost 100 pounds in a year doing that work, and I had never felt closer to God because I also applied the Book of Mormon to it and was using my own scripture study and just integrating it with, hers was a Christian program that just, perfectly correlated with the things that we already believe in this gospel, that it worked so well. And I was so grateful because I was like, you better help me, God, or this is it, I'm done. And he did help me.
Oh, wow.
And
that's great.
It's been a main staple in my life, and I didn't realize I was going to need the 12-step program later in life.
Wait, I have a quick question for you. So a couple things came to mind. One thing is we have a lot in common as far as like our upbringing. Have you ever read The Body Keeps the Score?
No, but I've heard a lot about it.
It was actually written by one of the main, I don't know if he's a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but he basically kind of discovered, along with other people in his field, PTSD. He started treating vets early on in his career, and he has been tracking it, studying it, treating it, and so he wrote a book on it. So it's the first book about PTSD. It talks a lot about, coping mechanisms that people come up with to deal with trauma, which was probably your addiction to food.
It was
huge. It even talks about how, if people are sexually abused, they will intentionally gain weight to protect themselves from.
That was part of things as a kid that happened. It's okay, it wasn't family related, so that, it's still traumatic, but it wasn't something I viewed as, it just definitely, as a little kid, you're set up to fail in that sexualized early and pornography around and some of those things in a non-religious sort of family that are somewhat acceptable. Like in most of the world, those type of things around are normal. Yeah. And most kids experience being and dealing with that kind of stuff present in their life. And I can see, looking back, where that just everything you've ever been through has roots in your childhood
Oh,
beliefs.
yes. Oh, yes.
And you cannot get away from that childhood thinking because those thoughts were established when you were young that created beliefs that follow you around.
Yes, and that's what the Body Keeps the Score talks about, is when you are young, your brain is developing, and so what you're learning is creating these like pathways of neurons in your brain, and it's how you expect the world to be around you for the rest of your life. And so if you're experiencing trauma at a young age, you're creating these habits and views that are literally just ingrained in your brain physiologically. And so that's why it's so hard to break.
Yeah. It's like you put on a pair of glasses that see the world from that complete perspective. They're just wired to go with what you saw as a kid.
Right. But I do believe that you can change through the atonement. I think it takes work, and it doesn't
That's what this
Yes,
does.
yes.
And that's what I've gotten to experience.
Yeah, talking about the church's 12-step program, I'm going to just read the acknowledgments. If you get online, and I'll link all the 12-step program under the video. The Healing Through the Savior, the Addiction Recovery Program 12-Step Recovery Guide, has adapted the original 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous World Services, Inc. into a framework of the doctrines, principles, and beliefs of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. One of the reasons why I want to talk about the 12-step program is because when I came back to church, I did it on my own. I did it with God, but I was really humble. I was really heartbroken, and I turned to God, and I went through this whole transformation. And I remember there was a day, and I wish I could remember who it was, but I was telling them about everything I had been going through. And they said to me, "It sounds like you went through the 12-step program." And I was like, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah, everything you've done is like the 12 steps." And so I've always been intrigued by it. And then I actually went to AA like a month ago with a friend of mine because I wanted to do research for this. So anyways, I went to an AA meeting and I read through the 12 steps for the first time. And I was just blown away that I really was taken through each of these steps without even knowing the steps. It's such a testament to me that it is so inspired of God, because it is the natural evolution of what it is to come back to Him, to repent, to become clean, to change, and to stay changed. And so it's incredible. I think the 12-step program is incredible, and I've never even done it, so I'm so excited to talk to you about it.
The part that's kind of cool about what I was looking up, one of the quotes that inspired me the most is, because my life had gotten messy, but I had times where I would get it together and stop and do everything right, and then it's like I would slip back and stuff would happen and the drama or the chaos in my own life would surface again. And the quote was, "If you can identify a pattern, you can solve any problem." And I started applying that to everything, and it's changed my world in being able to identify patterns and to look at things. And I think the thing that is most beautiful to me that I've walked away from with this program is that God's grace is universal for all of us, and His love for every person. And the 12-step program is a pattern of growth that He has put here and that is available to all of us if we will choose into it, and that change is possible, and that you are not stuck ever anywhere. And it's just, you have to choose into it and want more for yourself in your own life. And what brought me to this program, ultimately, alcohol was what brought me to my knees. But I struggled with everything else. I've been married twice, and my second marriage that I went into, I was not active in the church. So kind of going back to, I didn't date. I married my first boyfriend, and we got married in the temple, and I lived a very, traditional LDS lifestyle. He was a great husband and a good dad and did the things that he was supposed to. And slowly what happened to me is and it's kind of ironic in that how Satan gets, if he can get his foot in the door with lust, then you're kind of a goner in that. If his foot gets in the door there, which that's what happened to me originally. I started reading dirty romance novel kind of things, and
I'm not following. If he can get his foot in the door in a relationship or just in your life?
In your behavior.
Oh.
That's a human vulnerability in lusting after just feelings or like that sort of genre. For men it's pornography, but for women, it manifests more in like some of that emotional romance novels and an idealized sort of love life. And then you start looking at your spouse and partner as like, ugh, well, you suck. And that's, it's just when the foot's in the door in those areas, stuff can start to go downhill. And it's it's like that flaxen cord that slowly wraps around you. And that's how originally it started in my life. I began to believe that my husband didn't love me, and convinced myself of that belief because that was one of my original wounds from my childhood, and just fatherhood wounds and divorce, and as a little girl thinking, oh, my dad doesn't want me. And that was the pattern that continued to play out in my life, and just the belief that was continuously validated in one form or another. So I started walking down that path, and it led to divorce. And I thought and believed it was justified. I was angry at God in that I felt like I was doing everything I should be doing, and I still wasn't happy. And I wanted to do it my way. I just wanted to have friends. I wanted to socialize. I wanted to be able to have a life like everybody else gets to have, and they look like they're having fun. And I ended up ending my marriage and hurting my kids in ways that I never thought I would be that person. I just didn't think I would do that, especially having been a kid that came from divorce. And both of my parents my mom had been married 3 or 4 times, my dad too, same sort of realm. Like my examples of relationships were not that great. And so the tools that I had were not there. I didn't have them. And didn't even realize. It's like I was asleep and didn't even realize how lacking I was in the ability to properly make choices and handle my life in a way that would serve me. So I met my second husband, and we moved into a relationship fast. He had 2 little kids, and so did I, and good for quite a while. But things started with pain pills, and alcohol was involved in everything, and the little things. And then as time went on, those cycles of abuse went from alcohol, pills, to marijuana. It was a constant, yes, you'd use one to get over the other, and you weren't you still did your life and functioned the best you could. But what started to happen is I started to wake up to the reality of what I had done to my family, and seeing that my boy's father was actually a good husband and a good dad. And I started waking up to the reality of my own character and my own flaws and faults, and how the mistakes I had made. And
how did you start waking up to that? Were you getting in trouble? Was it consequences? Or were you starting to think about church? Were you opening the door to God? How did that creep in?
We actually went on a family trip, and my second husband was a different kind of personality from my first husband. I remember being at Disneyland and watching other dads pick up their kids, and them riding on their shoulders, and seeing that interaction, and realizing that I was never going to get to experience that again with my own sons, and watching their dad love on them. And as a step parent is never your actual parent. They can be great, and other people have different experiences, but my experience of a step parent was they didn't ever replace your own parents. And just some of those small things along the way. My first husband and I, John and I, never fought. We didn't have conflict. He was easygoing, and I was too, for the most part. We just didn't have conflict. It was a slingshot to the other end in the second marriage, in that constant conflict. Everything was a fight. It was the complete opposite experience. That just, that's hard on your nervous system. And then it was turning to things to cope that created a pattern, and it started happening more and more. And it was fun at first, and it wasn't meant to be something that, and he never made me do anything. It was completely my choice to participate in that. But I wanted to be connected to who I was with. And so in efforts to connect, you do the same things. And that had been his lifestyle his whole life. He was raised in the church, but it wasn't something that he cared about. In that we had an addict, codependent paradigm type of thing, where when he was in addictive spaces, I was in codependent spaces. And when I was in addict spaces, he could, so we would feed each other both ways, that we could both flip-flop. And when I was in the depths of addiction, that was hard for him too, because he had learned better levels of managing it, because it had just been part of his lifestyle, where I didn't handle alcohol well, in that I never knew when to stop. And no matter how hard I tried, I would always go past that line of being able to stop. And that's where it did bring me to my knees. And I'm grateful for that, because it's changed everything, in that I did need help in being able to address these things. I think of it like how they talk about your life is cyclical, and how you come back around to things over and over. And we'd separate, and, he'd kick me out, and I'd move out and start a new life, and then we'd end up back together, which it happened.
Well, those relationships are addicting in themselves, like the ups and the downs. The highs are so high and the lows are so low, and so now you're becoming addicted to this relationship.
We were addicted to each other, and it mirrored all of my childhood and everything that it was. And so I had this experience where he had kicked me out, and the bishop helped me move up the street to a house in the neighborhood temporarily until I could find a place, because my kid's dad was like, "Erica, this is not normal. You cannot keep living here and doing this if this is the kind of stuff that's going to happen." And I'm so glad that he created that boundary, because there was no way I was going to not choose my children. And it changed things for me. So I moved up the street. I was taking the garbage cans out. I was bringing them back in and it was on a hill, so it tipped over. And I just flipped it up with one arm, and it pulled the weirdest muscle in my back that was the size of a quarter. And I could not get this pain to go away. And I was praying about it. And I had got to the point where I'm like, "Please help me fix this. What do I do?" And the thought came to mind of, make the same movement that caused the wound. And so I stood up and I reenacted what I did to pull the muscle, and it stretched it, and it started to heal. And I had been suffering for a week, and so I was just like, wow, that's all I had to do. It stuck with me, in that this is what happened. And as I talked to God about that, and just prayer, and I had the impression come over me, and this is what's happening in your life too. And that all of this drama and this chaos and these things going on are because I'm stretching wounds that you've had so that they can heal. And so as you go around, you come back around to these things, it's like God is stretching wounds that you have, that some of them I didn't even realize I had that were causing so many problems. That in and of itself, that is healing. That's the process of healing, and that your life will stretch your wounds until they're healed, over and over and over again. And the 12-step program is a structured type of system that helps you to see how those wounds within you are being stretched and healing. Awareness is the beginning of all healing. Unless you let yourself become aware of who you are and what you're doing and why you do what you do, you cannot move forward. Step one is honesty. This relationship was the catalyst in my life.
So that's what got you to go back to the 12-step program? Is that?
I wanted to save my marriage. I wanted us to be able to overcome those things. I had made the mistake already of ruining my family and going through a divorce, and I promised God, I will not do that again. I don't want to do that again. I want to learn from that experience, and I don't want to hurt someone else or my kids and family that way. After a weekend of some alcohol causing some problems, we ended up going to the stake president and the bishop, and they told me about the 12-step program and doing the little things.
So was that your first introduction to the church's 12-step program?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I went to one of my first meetings. My first meeting was actually step 11, which is personal revelation. And it is seek through prayer and meditation to know the Lord's will and have the power to carry it out. And it's my favorite step because that's what it has taken to be able to change my life. And so I started the program in efforts to save my marriage, basically. And
So he was there with you?
he went to the first meeting, but I did it on my own continuously from there. So that's what got me in the door, and it helped. My dad had committed suicide the year previous to my first going to this 12-step program. So it's like things were starting to come to a head in my life, and his suicide was the ultimate abandonment coming full circle in those type of things. And so that was part of those wounds being stretched. And he really did help me from the other side through all of this program. Nobody talks about it or how to deal with it and handle it or what to even think about it. And so I started doing a lot of digging and researching and looking for things my own self. And my hairdresser told me about a book, and I got it from the library, and the person that had it before me had put all these sticky notes in it about how it correlated with the gospel. And it's The Afterlife of Billy Fingers. And it's a true story about a lady whose brother had a crazy life and just addiction type of things. And she actually started hearing him from the other side when he died. And it's just drew me in because
that sounds fascinating.
it was. And I completely believe her story, and the stuff that he talked about is amazing. There were two things from the book that stuck with me and were the beginning of some of my awakening and moving forward with my dad passing.
Oh, okay.
And the one quote is, to cultivate more joy, pay attention to the things that you like. That's one of the secrets to life, because I was depressed. I was having a hard time finding joy in life, but that little quote works in that when you pay attention to what you like, you can get happier and you start seeing all the good that is in your life and how all is not lost. And the other thing you talked about was what we are here learning in life involves either learning to let go or learning to accept things. Acceptance and letting go are two of our main lessons. And it's funny how it always comes back to those. So it felt like a gift from the other side to find the book, but not only that, someone else had put all the notes in to correlate things from the gospel that are the language I speak in spirituality, because it is part of my life.
That is so cool. Such divine intervention.
Yes, it was. The 12-step program is that. It adapts the LDS language that we all know being part of this gospel into the 12-step program. It changes some of the verbiage and it makes Christ a focus. So it's following the same outline, but it's like another testament, another way to look at it. And I have a belief in that. I am all about inclusion, not exclusion. And I love all the different ways that we're all saying so much of the same thing in different words. And it's just a language of how you speak. And there's truth everywhere when you look for it and when you're seeking it. And God does love all of his children everywhere. And he's given them places to find him in their cultures too.
Right. And it actually, that makes me think of what I was going to say earlier, is how inspired Alcoholics Anonymous is, and it is very much not a religious organization. And my uncle told me this story, so I was going to look it up and I didn't have time.
It was Bill W. and Dr. Bob. And Bill W. was in the hospital recovering from an alcohol getting sober thing, and Dr. Bob had struggled too, and that's how they crossed paths in just a serendipitous way of coming together.
Wow.
And became friends and developing it. And they adapted it from it's an Oxford Christian system that provided like the skeletal framework of the 12 steps, and proceeded to make it from there, where like the main points, the core, I loved this part that I read about it where it says anonymity, which is why it's called Alcoholics Anonymous. Anonymity is a core philosophy because it's to ensure humility, in that no one is better than anyone. And why I kept going back to the meetings was because it felt like a safe place to share what was really going on in my life. At the beginning of the meeting, one of the things that we recite says, "Who you see here, what you hear here, when you leave here, let it stay here." And we all say, "Here, here." And I didn't realize how having a safe place to share things was not really a part of my life. Like, you know, if you tell your mom, then your grandma finds out, and then before you know it, everybody in the family kind of knows what's going on. Or you learn to be quiet because everybody's sick of your drama, and you don't want, it's and so going to these meetings and having that safe place to share, I love that originally that's why it's part of the name, and that everybody, it's nice to know that you can be anonymous in your participation of the program. And other people, it's not someone else's story to tell, and so they don't get to tell your story to other people. And that made me feel so safe, and it was part of why I kept going back. So the first 3 steps are you giving up. The next 3 steps are the cleanup of your life. So steps 4 through 6 are the cleanup. Steps 7 through 9 are the making up process. And steps 10 through 12 are keeping up, the maintenance steps. They all build upon each other, every part of the 12 step. And so as you work through the program, each layer builds upon each other. And it prepares you for the next one, to be able to handle the next one as you move forward in your personal healing. The part that I have found to be the most empowering in all these steps is it's a process of remembering who you are and knowing who you are and your identity as a person, which that was something that I had lost along the way, and also hadn't even developed in certain ways, because that was causing problems in just, my childhood, and pleasing one parent, pleasing another. And I asked God to help me heal after my dad's suicide. And he took me on a journey that was this program, and my life exploded, and I had a whole bunch of things come up that I needed to find a way to make money fast. I wanted to be alone, and so I decided to get my CDL. I come from a family of truck drivers. My dad was an owner-operator and managed a business. He hauled gravel, and all the men in my family had this career. And I was like, well, I'll just hurry and get my CDL, and then I can make enough money to pay my bills and handle everything. And it was actually one of the steps in here. I had some hate towards men in just my own dad and my own experiences. And when I asked God to heal, I didn't realize that walking a mile in their shoes, it's almost like I got to be raised the rest of the way by going into this industry and working with other men. And it helped me to understand myself. One of the steps in making restitution and reconciliation, and sometimes people are gone and you can't personally apologize to them. And before my dad passed away, I got to spend time with him, and we had a summer together. And I got to see him as a man and realize that he had a good heart. He just had his own problems. So in wanting to heal, I maybe couldn't apologize to him for being angry at him over the years, but I could treat other men better. I could find ways to understand where they're coming from and offer them kindness in a way that I wished I could have given my dad. That's what I got to do in this job, and in turn it gave me perspective to be able to forgive my own dad.
Isn't it cool how when you're ready to heal, when you go to God, then things really start happening in your life? It seems overwhelming sometimes because you're like, it's like you've been doing all of these habits to avoid, ignore, to bury things. And then as soon as you're ready, it's kind of like you're drinking from a fire hose, because it's like you've suppressed it for so long, and then you're ready to heal. And it means, there's going to be some growing pains.
It wasn't an easy thing.
I want to know, what specifically steps do you find to be the most impactful, or were the most impactful for you? Like, what really helped change you?
I think for me, step 2 was a huge one. And I had a big turning point in my life when I realized that I was putting all of my hopes and dreams and my worth and value into other people's hands. That I was, the world teaches you to seek validation outside of you. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to figure out who I was, and I was going through these life problems and having these relationship issues. I'm grateful for them in hindsight because they were the catalyst to change in my life. It was a gift and not something to feel bad about. But that's what this program has done, is help me to look at my life through the lens of how God sees me, of how I can see all the things that seem so awful and horrible as actual gifts, and that they were given to me to help me become better. And as I faced all of these things that were, addiction is what you see, in that this is the result, but the real problem is a deeper root.
Oh, yes.
In that my behavior, it finally surfaced in an addiction so that I could actually look at the root problems and causes of everything going on. And that's a layer of honesty that as you circle through the steps, you come back to it over and over again. And, God knows what you can handle, and He slowly brings everything to your attention in a patterned way that you can work through it.
Right. I like how you said that you have to go through it over and over again, because it takes a lifetime to understand everything about yourself. Salvation, exaltation is a long process, and I like how you said that. That's how God has helped me, is the first go around when I came back, He kind of blinded me from my past, which made it easy for me to just move forward, to start the changes I needed to change, like quitting drinking, going to church, keeping the Sabbath, just all these things. Those are easier. And then you start coming back around, and it's oh, you've got a temper. Oh, you really start taking more of I think it says on there, an inventory of God showing you things about yourself that you were kind of blinded to before, because you were either in survival mode. I was in survival mode and was kind of blind to really a lot of my shortcomings. There's a quote by C.S. Lewis that I love, and it's, "A man doesn't know how bad he is until he tries to be good."
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's so good. And I remember reading that in that time, and I was like, wow, no truer words have ever been spoken, because I felt like an idiot.
To think of how blind you were, that's awakening in and of itself. You can pray that the Lord will help you see yourself and your life as He sees it, with all your divine potential, and what you risk by continuing in your addiction. Because it's hard to be honest about what your addiction costs you. You have to ask for help to see yourself, the good and the bad. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's difficult to see the bad, that you need help to look at the bad too. And that it's almost like your ego cannot take the awakening of the reality of where you've gotten yourself to.
Yeah, And that is kind of where my dad, he just never got past that.
It's hard for everyone.
It's critical. It is critical. And he could never get past that step. He never really fully surrendered to God, and he hasn't been able to stay sober.
One of the things that has helped me in just understanding people in that situation and like, why would you want to stay there? Why don't you want to get better?
Right.
Because my ex-husband didn't have any desire to want to change or even think it was necessary. My brother said to me once, because both of my brothers have been addicts too, and once you start getting sober, suddenly you become aware of everything that's messed up in your life, and now you have to face it all without a buzz. And that's hard because those are the things that you've always dealt with.
That's how you coped with those problems, yeah.
And so sometimes that's where people get stuck in that loop and that cycle because you don't know how to cope. And that's, I think the miracle is that God can become that replacement, that he can fill that hole in your heart so that you can move through these steps. Oh, I should have found the scripture. And it's one that I've opened my scriptures up to numerous times, and it's been like,
It's your scripture.
yes, that is about how he'll make your burdens light and he'll help you get through this. That he's going to give you that strength to get through this part of the process, and that's how you will know that he is for you. And it's true. There have been times where I've gone through withdrawals from things that he carried me through that I didn't know how I was going to get through. That's a real reality in addiction. And what happens as you go through all 12 of these steps is you have a spiritual awakening. And as you have a spiritual awakening, you change. At one point, though, I remember thinking, how am I ever going to get away from these things? What really changed was my marriage did end. And as soon as I was no longer in the same environment with him, I was able to continue changing because these steps had already been part of my life and part of my process. And I realized I can do this. I fought for a really long time that your environment, I wanted to believe that it doesn't affect you the same, and that I could be strong enough, and that I could do it no matter what I'm surrounded by, because there will always be someone or something that is doing those things. And if you're subject to that, I was always going to have problems. As soon as my environment was different, changing was so much easier. It's more about humility. And that's step 7. And being able to humble yourself enough to know that what you are surrounded by does become part of your life, that your environment does affect you.
One that sticks out to me, and I find this so interesting, is step 5. Admit to ourselves to our Heavenly Father in the name of Jesus Christ, to proper priesthood authority, and to another person the exact nature of our wrongs. Now, that step is an Alcoholics Anonymous step. It's interesting because I know a lot of people complain about having to confess to your bishop about, like, why do you have to talk to a bishop? There's a lot of people that aren't members that say things like that, but it's like there's clearly power in it because AA, it's not your bishop, but it's like a sponsor or a close friend, like to confess essentially to them. So there's clearly divine power in confessing what you've done, and not even necessarily to the person that you may have wronged, which I think is a different step later on. But like, I just find that so fascinating that AA has that step. So interesting to me.
To be able to talk about your life with another person and all the things that you are ashamed of, and truly being honest and truthful about and saying it out loud. Like, my sponsor is my cousin, and she's not a member. She has done the Al-Anon program, which is for families and for people that are connected to addicts. And
in my situation would do Al-Anon, yeah.
Al-Anon changed everything for her in just becoming a better person. And it's the same steps, it's the same 12 steps as the AA program. And it's just applied in a different way, which they've taken the 12-step and applied it to Narcotics Anonymous. There's a Gamblers Anonymous. These 12 steps have so much power because they do work. And the confessing part, talking to my cousin or talking about those things, like even my work friend, and being able to be open and honest with her, the clarity that came, she was there for me through my divorce in a way that I had a person to truly be honest about everything that was going on. What I got from confessing it and saying out loud the details of stuff was that I got to hear it. And hearing it out loud puts it into a different perspective. Yeah. And then as you confess things too, you realize the distortion in some of your perspectives. Like whether you're confessing to a therapist or a friend or a sponsor or a bishop, it's another person to help you clearly see where you are hurting yourself, where you're being too hard on yourself at times. A therapist I had, when I told her some things going on, and she had made this list of the stuff I said. And during this I said, oh, my cousin's gone through some similar things. And she handed me the list and she said, would you say any of these things to your cousin? And I was like, no, never. These are horrible. These are things I would never say to another person. Yet here I am telling myself them repeatedly over and over that are detrimental and not helpful. And when you confess all the things and different stuff, there's people that can help you put it in better form, to see where you're going wrong, that it's actually turns out to be a gift. It's like, that awful feeling before you go in to talk to the bishop and how you're scared. And yet when you leave, it's like, your life's a feather.
Yes. And yes.
You can't believe you waited so long to do that. And that it really wasn't as dramatic and horrible as you thought it was going to be. Anytime you have a secret, that's when you know it's something that's not good for you. So part of like healing and these steps and like confessing is being able to come to a place where you're at peace with who you really are and what you've done. And
that can take a long time.
It's a process for sure. The real gift I found in this program is realizing that I know who I am and God knows who I am. He knows my heart and He knows my life. He knows everything I've been through. He knows my parents. He knows every situation. And He knows the motivations behind why I did some of the things that I did and why I thought the ways that I thought. Step 2 being hope. It was that, I was hoping everyone around me could see me or see who I really was, and that I wouldn't be judged, and that I could be loved and accepted for who I really was. And most people don't even know how to do that for themselves, let alone you. Right. And when I started to understand that God knows all of my hopes and dreams, everything that I am, and as long as I know that and trust that He knows them too, I was no longer handing my worth and value over to other people. And I was able to find my footing as a person in that I know who I am, and so does God. That's what this program gave to me in a way that nothing else in life has.
That is incredible. So something you just said, you were talking about how this program is universal, and it's been used for gambling, and it can be used for porn addiction. And then you originally found it with a food addiction. And so in the beginning of my understanding of the 12-step program, it was just addiction. Like I drug addiction, alcohol addiction, or porn addiction. That was always where my brain went. But I guess I want to try and help remove that stigma and help people to understand that this can be for an anger addiction. This can be for a food addiction, like you said. Or I had actually gotten sober shortly before that because I was tired of going to the bar, tired of the same life, because I was seeing this pattern and this cycle that I couldn't get out of. I didn't know how to change. I didn't have the tools like you were saying. And by surrendering to God, it's the first step was, admitting that you have a problem. Well, I admitted that I was powerless over my life. I was in this cycle that I couldn't get out of. I felt like I had no idea what I was doing. And I was completely humbled and just, I felt very powerless. And then I had a hope in God, and I found out there was a God. And I think that hope is what drove me. God revealing himself to me, and the hope that lit a fire in me, and it just drove me through the rest of these steps. Yeah. But I wonder if I was addicted to maybe just the pattern of my life. Like, I didn't know how, and the depression. There's a line in a song that I love, Smashing Pumpkins, Billy Corgan. There's a line in one of his songs that says, "I'm in love with my sadness." Yeah. And I think that
addicted to pain.
I have seen that with people, and I've seen it in myself, especially when I was in high school.
I think we have an addiction to pain and just an addiction to your thought patterns. It's like those glasses. Your experiences taint your vision of everything, and those distorted perspectives rule your life, and you get to a point where I can't do this anymore. Like, I need your help, God, because I promise I'll listen. I cannot keep living in this pattern. I cannot keep doing these same things. And it felt like no matter what I was doing, it wasn't enough, and I didn't know how to change.
And that's what the 12-step can do, is
it's the process of change.
You free from that cycle.
It does. And like, who isn't lost at some point in your life? You know, you come with, you're the DNA of your parents. The things that you know are the things that you were taught. And it's part of you. That's just how we all begin. And I wanted to be better. I wanted more for myself. There had to be more to life than just feeling awful all the time, or looking for an escape, or numbing, or like, there had to be more to this. The miracle that, like, Christ knew who he was. He knew his mission. He knew that he had a work to do for God, and he was clear on his identity as he moved through his life. And it was not an easy life that he had, just like all of us. I don't know one person, no matter how perfect their life may look on the surface, that doesn't have something. From where I was to where I am now, in the process of 8.5 years, I work at the temple once a week now, and all the women that I get to spend time with there, they all have things in their families and their lives. It's very eye-opening to really see that it doesn't matter what level you're at or where you are, that you're still dealing with stuff. And being in this program, different couples are missionaries and come in, and I've watched those couples' lives change in their service to us, in that their eyes are open to how they have addictions in certain ways too, and how these steps help them. And they all talk about how these meetings are like the best testimony meeting they've ever been to, because people are being authentic and real about who they are, where they're at, and their struggles. And when you allow yourself to be vulnerable and open up in these meetings with other people and make connections, you realize you're not alone. And that's part of healing, like the connections and the community that you have in going to church and going to these meetings. Oh, in personal revelation, I have a thing written that's not perfection, but more purity. You'll never be perfect, but you can focus on becoming more pure in the ways that you deal with and handle things. As you do that, you make progress, because you're cleaning up your life, you're cleaning up yourself, you're cleaning up your thoughts, the things that you think create your emotions, and your emotions create your actions. And you have to clean up the way that you think about yourself and your life, and these steps help all of that, and you're able to truly change. A random thing happened with my friend where my phone sent her a text of a quote that I'm like, I didn't send this to you. And the quote was about, you cannot create miracles in your life. They are a gift from the divine. And you just have to be willing to put yourself in a miracle zone. It turns out the miracle zone is troubles, pain and suffering. But what comes from the miracle zone is that the divine does step in your life, and God does create a miracle for you because you are his child, and he knows exactly what you need, and he will take care of you. When you look at your life as a miracle zone and all the things and troubles and drama you've experienced and pain, you can see your life in a different way and realize that had I not had these problems, I wouldn't have gotten to know the friend that I have in Christ. Like, the one thing that we all have in common are emotions. Like, in relating to other people, we all go through different experiences, but a lot of those experiences trigger and cause a lot of the same emotions. And my favorite thing about Christ is that he knows every single one of those emotions, those feelings, because he felt them. He walked through the actual experience of feeling them in his body. And in my lowest moments, he has been there holding my hand, in that I wasn't ever really alone. And he was there with me in feeling the pain that I was feeling through every layer of facing yourself. Because facing yourself is a hard thing to do. And that's what you do in a 12-step program. And people don't stick with them because it's painful and it's hard.
Be the hardest thing for some people.
It is. You don't want to be alone. You don't want to do those things. And as I let that truth of I'm not alone, he does know how I feel. I've been able to make it through all kinds of things that I'm like, I'm not alone. And now it's a habit and a process of taking my emotions to him. And my coping is not in turning to things outside of me. It's not in, spending money on some new stuff, or, it can become so many different things that you use to cope. Even if you are healthy and not wrapped in an addiction, you can still have bad behaviors.
No, there's shopping addictions. Yes. There's sugar addictions. There's addictions.
Under the sun.
Yeah, really.
But that's where I take those emotions to him now. And I get to have a real conversation about what's going on inside of me, so that I can make a better choice, so that I can change, so that I can do it differently than what I've done before. A major thing that our system talks about and how it's different is there's a section that's called the action steps. And it's a program of action. Nothing changes until you take and make different actions in your life happen, to where you can read something all if you want, but until you actually do it differently, nothing will change.
I love that testimony that you just gave, and it's incredible. It is so incredible what you've been through, how you've changed, and it's beautiful. And it is, I'm even kind of thinking back about some things that I haven't really thought of, like how far I've come. I've been back in the church for 13 years almost. I think it'll be like 13 years this fall. Gosh, and even just like those really hard things, like the way you think about yourself or your thought patterns, like those are the hardest things to change. And I have come so far when I look back at those beginning days. So it's just really cool to see, how much this has obviously changed you, and how you can testify to the steps and helping them teach you to cope and change and come closer to God and improve your life overall. And I just wanted to ask, since you've been serving in the 12-step program, I was wondering if you have any specific things you'd want to share, if just seeing how it's impacted other people's lives.
My favorite story is of a couple that I think they were actually talked about in conference, and they both were addicts. She had been to prison, and he had struggled with alcohol. They had kids together, and they were divorced and were separated. And their one daughter went on a mission, and she was home from her mission because she had to have a surgery. Their story is so beautiful in that we watched their family transform and their dad come back to the gospel, and they got married again. And just witnessing how this program helps families. It's not just, now there's the ARP portion is for the addict part, but there is another whole section that is like Al-Anon, but it's for the people that are dealing with you being an addict.
Right.
It just can heal so much. And as the world has destroyed the family, not knowing who you are and losing your identity is easy, because when you're not raised by your parent or you have a broken home, you don't know yourself.
You lose your identity so fast when the family falls apart. It's so true.
And Christ helps you to find your true identity again, and remembering who you are. Every time I have come to step 7, which is humility, it's about remembering who I am, being humble enough to know that I'm nothing, but I'm also something to Him. And knowing your value and your worth, you can't progress in life, and you don't get very far if you don't know your own value and your own worth. And there's people everywhere that struggle with that, whether they have addictions or not. That's what is healed. That's what your heart is changed in realizing that you do have value. The worth of your soul is great in the sight of God. And if that's true for me, it's true for you. It's true for everyone. And watching that work in someone else's life is what keeps me going back every week. In that if I can share a testimony of how this has changed my life, and it helps someone else to find the truth of who they are, for them to not have to live in the agony and the pain of that you're nobody and that you don't matter. Oh, you're not smart enough, you're not pretty enough, you'll never be anybody. It doesn't, like, those are all just lies that keep you distracted from fulfilling the measure of your creation and being a good mother, being a good father. Like, God wants so much good for you, and He wants to help you find it in a way that you can. And watching that happen for other people, watching a light come on in someone else's eyes of knowing their worth is reason enough. That's the gift that He gave me, in that He knows who I am. And it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks of me. I know who I am. And I can be forgiven for the mistakes that I've made. Everything has its purpose in your life. God, through this program, has helped me to see my life through His eyes and not through the eyes of the world and the labels the world would give me. Everyone deserves to see themselves how God sees them, not through the eyes of the world. Those are not accurate.
That was beautiful. Oh, man. And so many things you said, like, I just keep thinking about what Oak said yesterday, the humility.
It's strengthening our faith in Him, increasing our humility, seeking help from others through community, through vulnerability.
The 12-step. Yeah, there's so many things that you've just touched on, were so many things that Oaks talked about yesterday.
Being patient.
You are incredible. Your testimony's incredible. Your story's incredible. You're such a light. You're such a light, and I can see it in your eyes. And I love what you've learned, and I feel like I have so much in common with you. Like you said, we don't have the exact same experiences, but our feelings are so similar. I think we've had a lot of similar experiences as far as childhood. It's been such a blessing to talk to you and learn from you and hear your testimony.
Thank you for letting me.
I usually end each episode with giving us your why. Like, why do you volunteer with this program and follow Jesus Christ?
Why I volunteer with this program and what keeps me coming back every week is that every person matters. I want everyone to find the freedom that I have found in change, in that I can overcome myself. This is the way to do it. Christ has set an example to follow. He showed us a path to overcome the world, to overcome all of these things that come at you. And it's real. You are not left to a miserable life. Change is the hardest thing for any and everyone. To have someone walk you through the steps of being able to change, it's a miracle. It is a miracle, and I love the process of change and being able to witness that in other people's lives, to speak of truth. Truth sets you free, and the more truth that I can tell myself, the better I get. The more truth that I watch other people bring into their lives, the better their lives get. There are so many lies that distract you and that keep you stuck. And all I ever wanted at times when I was struggling the most was for someone to remind me of the truth. And that truth being, you're better than this. You can overcome this. It's going to be okay. All is not lost. And every soul has value to God, and no matter who you are, and we all struggle, and that's not what God wants for us. He wants so much more for you in knowing who you are, and not knowing who you are leads to addictive behaviors that hurt you, and there's a way out. There's a way out. My why is that there's a way out. And how could I not advocate for a way out of pain and misery?
I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me relive and go within my own self to find my why, to realize all of those things, to know and remember. Sometimes, one of my favorite quotes, sometimes we forget so that we can remember. And I think that's true, and you might mess up in your life, but in that forgetting, you also have the opportunity to truly remember who you really are.
Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed this content, please like, subscribe, and share. The Be Faithful podcast is not endorsed or sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This is my personal attempt to share the light of Jesus Christ and to testify that He lives. So please stay tuned for more inspiring conversations. And until next time, keep the faith.